Biology 100, this is Chapter 18, Animal Reproduction and Development, Section 3, Human Reproduction. So in this section, we're going to be describing the human testicular and ovarian reproductive anatomies. We're also going to be describing spermatogenesis and oogenesis, and we're going to describe the differences and similarities of the two. Then we're going to describe the roles of hormones in human reproduction, as well as the roles of reproductive hormones. Human reproductive anatomy is complex adaptations with specialized male and female anatomy. There's also specialized hormonal regulation as well as behavioral controls by the brain and the endocrine system. The development of the reproductive anatomy is such that male and female reproductive structures are very similar in the beginning, up to about 7 weeks of gestation, and then the development starts diverging based on either the presence or absence of testosterone. In the presence of testosterone, the male structures develop. In the absence of testosterone, the female structures develop. Some of the homologous structures of the male and female anatomy includes some of the same embryonic tissue. That is, the penis is the clitoris and the scrotum is the labia. The prostatic utricle is what is developed in the males in the presence of testosterone. That would be the uterus, cervix, and vagina in the absence of testosterone. These differences arise from hormonal signals. So with the male anatomy, we have the testes, which are located outside of the body in the scrotum, and they maintain a temperature which is lower than that of the body temperature, which is necessary for viable sperm production. Failure of a testes to descend is called cryptorchid, and this leads to a reduction in fertility. The scrotum and the testes are a structure where the scrotum houses the testes and contains blood vessels, nerves, and muscles. The testes are the male gonads, which then produce sperm and hormones, mainly testosterone. Inside each testes are seminiferous tubules, and these produce sperm, and these are specialized cells that support and nourish the development of the sperm. Other specialized cells produce testosterone, and then developing sperm mature as they move toward the tubule lumen. Sperm structure is the head, which contains all of the genetic material, which is haploid, which is only half of what's necessary to create a human. The head is what produces an enzyme necessary to penetrate the egg and then fertilize the egg. The neck, which contains mitochondria, provides the energy for the flagellum, which enables the movement. So with the head, neck, and flagellum creating the entire sperm. Female structures, so we have some external structures, which are the breasts and the vulva. Breasts contain mammary glands that produce milk, and this milk then nourishes and provides antibodies to support and protect the infant. Ovaries, these produce eggs, the ova, and hormones, which are estrogen and progesterone. And they contain a follicle that nourish developing eggs. And during ovulation, one egg is released. The corpus luteum forms after ovulation. This is where the egg breaks off, and then the corpus luteum forms and then helps maintain the uterine lining. The corpus luteum is what produces the hormones necessary to maintain that uterine lining. Oviducts, which are the fallopian tubes, are what transport the eggs from the ovary to the uterus. When fertilization takes place, the cilia and muscle contractions move the egg, the embryo, down the tube to the uterus, which is a thick muscular organ where the embryo implants and then develops. The lining of the uterus is called the endometrium, and this is where the the layer thickens for implantation. If no fertilization occurs, that lining is then shed, which is menstruation. The cervix is the lower part that opens up into the vagina. The vagina, which is the muscular canal, receives the penis during intercourse and allows menstrual flow to exit. This also serves as the birth canal during childbirth. Gametogenesis, this is the production of gametes. That is either the sperm or the egg, and this is done through meiosis, and we talked about meiosis in the previous chapter. And this creates the haploid cells by separating the chromosomes in two divisions. So the first division divides one cell into two, and the second division divides those two cells into four. So the first division, you still have the diploid chromosomes, and then at the second division, it becomes the haploid cells. And we talked about that in the previous chapter. So the difference between spermatogenesis and oogenesis is that we end up with 4 functioning sperm cells. With oogenesis, we only have 1 functioning egg. So hormonal controls, we're going to go the male, and then we're going to go into the female. So hormonal controls begin at puberty for the male, and this happens starting with the hypothalamus, which releases these hormones to control the growth and development of the male. And this happens through the anterior pituitary. So the hypothalamus releases hormones that then regulate the anterior pituitary, which releases other hormones. The hormones include FSH and LH. So FSH, which is the follicle stimulating hormone, acts on certain cells in the tubules, which produce the sperm. LH, which is luteinizing hormones, stimulate the interstitial cells in the testes that produce and release testosterone into the blood. Testosterone stimulates sperm production and is responsible for the male's secondary sex characteristics. This is the deep voice, the facial hair, axillary hair, pubic hair, increased muscle mass, and the development of a sex drive, also called a libido. It is a negative feedback regulation. So high levels of testosterone inhibit the hypothalamus and the pituitary, reducing certain hormones, but maintaining hormone balance to prevents excess production. Females have cycles of hormone release and inhibition. So there is certain cycles that go through. So pregnancy begins with fertilization, and that happens in the fallopian tubes. And then that cycle ends at birth. So human gestation, which is 266 days or 38 weeks, it begins at the moment that the sperm is penetrating the egg and fuses its nuclei with the egg, creating a zygote. The zygote then undergoes cleavage and then travels down to the uterus via the fallopian tubes. The zygote must implant into the endometrium within 7 days or it will not survive. The implantation and hormones, after the zygote implants, the blastocyte develops into the uterine lining. Then there's a hormone that's released that maintains the corpus luteum. And this is back on the ovary. After the egg has been released, the corpus luteum develops. This ensures the continuation of progesterone production to support the endometrium. The endometrium has to stay in place in order for the zygote to implant and maintain viability. Pregnancy tests detect that particular hormone that is released from the corpus luteum, creating that thicker endometrium. That is the hormone that's tested during a pregnancy test. So the placenta functions as a nutrient delivery system, waste removal, and hormone production. So as the embryo integrates into the endometrium, the placenta takes over those actions. And there's passive immunity that happens maternally from the mother's antibodies into the offspring. The development of this offspring happens in 3 trimesters. From week 1 to week 12 is the first trimester, week 13 to 26 is the second trimester, and then from week 27 to birth is the 3rd trimester. Now, labor is initiated through estrogen, which increases the uterine sensitivity to oxytocin. As the baby positions its head down, its head starts stretching the cervix, and then that signals a triggering of the oxytocin release from the posterior pituitary. This release then controls a positive feedback loop which encourages the labor. So dilation, which is the opening of the cervix as it thins, and then the expulsion of the baby, all is regulated through this hormone release, which is then triggered by a physical action. So that concludes section 3 and the entire chapter, chapter 18. So head back to the textbook, do some review, and then I will see you in the discussion board.